Hi, my name is Ken Asserson. I wrote the Microbiome prescription website, and this is a video to go with my latest blog. The purposes of the blogs and the walkthrough is simple. Not to show you that you need to see me or consult with me. I don't want consultants. That's not my expertise. My expertise is in data science, artificial intelligence. The purpose is to show, hopefully, to teach you how to fish. So you can go and use the same resources and come up with answers which are appropriate for you, your preferences, your MD preferences, your other people living in your household preferences. So the purpose is to show you how to fish, not how to cook things and deliver you a prepared meal. So that's basically it. It's something I expect you to do a bit of work for it, and these walkthroughs are intended to assist you to learn how to cook. Just call me the Julia Childs of the microbiome. Okay, today's blog is an interesting one. And what makes it really interesting is because we have 3 samples from 3 different people in the same family. And I ended up having to do some back-end work to explore some issues, and it's interesting, and it gives me inspiration to consider adding some new features to the website. Often doing these blogs, I see something, wait a minute, why don't we have this information, or why can't we do that? And then foolishly I go and give you the possibility. Okay, so we have 3 people here. We have a mother who, for all practical purposes, is normal, healthy. We have a 10-year-old with autism or ADHD. We have a 7-year-old who's been bound in constipation for a long time. So we have 3 different microbiomes. What makes it interesting is this. We have 3 people living in the same household with shared DNA. And we know that DNA impacts the microbiome. And we also have the 3 people, given the ages of the kids, they unfortunately have very little choice with it, probably very similar diets or significantly similar diet. So what we would expect to see is similarity in the microbiome, which then opens up a beautiful opportunity to identify issues by looking at the similarities or the differences between these 3 people, which is an interesting concept. It means that if you're dealing with an autistic child, you may, or even a spouse with a issue, you may want to not just have them get the sample, you may want to get a sample yourself, taken at the same time ideally, because it may give insight to actually what's different, because we are controlling for physical environments, for diet to a very good extent. So it's sort of like, hey, this is an interesting concept, and let's see what happened. So the first thing we do is, I wanted to emphasize, we're dealing with 2 kids, and most of the data on the site is for adults. Most of the discoveries are based on adults, which immediately creates a problem. It creates a problem with anybody trying to deal with microbiome dysfunction. And why? Here we have a whole list of references and a chart from one of them that shows, and this is by group number, indicates age group number, and you can see how, wait a minute, things go up and things go down, and as some of the ages, their composition changes, and therefore what is normal changes, which means, oh, wait a minute, you mean my 4-year-old or my 11-year-old has different microbiomes for what should be healthy, what it should have? And the answer is yes. For a few autistic kids, I've seen some horrendous shift so far out of scale against other autistic kids and other children in general. So that's the first thing. In other words, we need to have some degree of caution in terms of applying adult standards to kids. Okay, now, as I indicated before, we have 3 people, and I went and ran a little analysis, and all 3 use the same lab. Cosmos ID or is actually the processing lab. Nevada Biome is the one, the retail front end of it. And went and ran and said, okay, which species do these guys have similarities in terms of numbers? And if you take a look here, you sort of say, what? I mean, just these are in percentiles. So all three are at over 90th percentile. Statistically, the chance of that happening at random is 1 times 10 to the third, or 1 in 1,000. But here's another one. Another 1 in 1,000. Another 1 in 1,000. In other words, guess what? You're looking at the effect of DNA and similar diet combination. It goes down and down and down and down. My first question is, am I seeing things? Is this something because I was expecting to see similarity. It's there, but it's just random. Well, I went back to the database, grabbed 2 other people at random who uses the same lab, Cosmos ID, because depending on the lab, there could be biases towards certain ones are overreported or underreported. And I grafted it. So what I would expect by random, actually I went back and picked 3, because we did with 3 people. I picked 3 at random and saw what happens. And guess what? We have a tremendous jump in similarity. And then I went down to species levels and even more jump. Now, at the species levels, we are talking about the ones who have the same species. We ignored the numbers for a moment, but have the same species. In other words, this particular bacteria, everybody seems to have, and over here we have about 1/3 of 3 random people having the same bacteria, which shows us, okay, however you care to explain it, it's sort of overwhelming that bacteria is shared between a mother and both of the children, and often ends up with the percentile ranking up, the amount being close to each other. And I use percentile here because doing a raw number often gets misleading, because you may be 90th percentile and the kid may be 92 percentile, but one is 40,000, one is 90,000, in which case you think it's a bigger difference. We are looking at percentiles because that gives the most meaningful scaling. And now we go down, and now next thing we do is we go and look at where there are differences. And what we see is we have a bunch of where the kids are different than the parents. And since the kids have different conditions, we will assume, and it's a pretty safe assumption, the reason for the difference is age. Remember, at the beginning we saw how bacteria changes by age. Guess what? We can actually see it here. So we go down and we see it, and this is the daughter. Okay, so some things are close, but some cases it's way down. Both of them are, for example, 70th percentile, and mom is down to 40th percentile. Number one, again, their numbers are close, and mom is 20 percentile away from the average of the two. May or may not be statistically significant, but it sure is appealing to assume that there is such a relationship being manifest. Okay, so with that said, the next thing was to go in and take a look at where the differences are between the kids. Remember, parents to kids are problematic. Kid to kid, same DNA, or actually 50% same DNA, probably similar eating, but different medical conditions. And looking at the mother gives a hint as to what the issues are. And we see some cases here where we have way down. This daughter with constipation is probably a contributing factor is an absence of those. And this case is likely that may be a cause for it too. So we have going down, and again we have some change, some huge and some not so huge. But we can identify by comparing the kids to say, okay, this particular one is probably connected to autism. This one is probably connected with autism. This one could be connected to autism. The fact that it's so much higher than the sibling, it's high and much higher than the adult, causes us to suspect that these are good candidates. Doesn't mean they are the gospel. What it means is they are good candidates. And now when we go over to the U.S. Library of Medical Studies on ADHD, we see some of them are in green there, and for autism, the same thing. So let's just go over there, and we have the list for autism here, and okay, and you can see whether or not it's seen to be high or low, and then of course, as always, the link to the study providing the information. So we can go down there. Some cases you can get contradictory results, like akromencia. You have 3 studies saying it's low, 1 saying it's high. That's reality. And there's 101 factors which could go into that, including the region of the world they live in, which impacts the probable DNA, as well as the diet. If one study was done on kids in, let's say, China, another one was done in the United Kingdom, the change of diet could be accounting for it. Some cases, and we see this in particular with constipation, high and low values of suffering is a cause. In other words, it's just away from the normal. It doesn't matter which way it goes. Either type of shift is associated with constipation. We are able to do this interesting approach, which I would refer to as using the familiar microbiome to reduce the noise, because things very sticks out more. So we can see, yep, you've got a ton of matches there for everything they're dealing with. And LA stripes is the only thing happens to be in common with, oh, I remember coccus is the only thing too. But with ADHD, we also have one more bacteria coming into the play. And then we have just one there for pneumococcus, and that one is one where high and low are both reported. And that's it. Now, one of the things that came out of doing this is I went to look at this particular bacteria and discover it occurs in only 3% of the sample. And it doesn't occur very often. Since it doesn't occur very often, then usually you don't get enough data on it from a typical study to detect anything. They just sort of, sorry, it's below our detection level. It's there. In fact, at 3%, you are probably looking and needing to have 1,000 participants in the study. Most studies do not go that high. Very rarely do go even over 100. And then it's compounded because whoever the 16S processor you are using for your study has to detect that. So the result is you could have a large enough sample, but your lab doesn't detect this bacteria, in which case you won't see it. Okay, so that's a problem. And I've done a separate blog on what to do when there's no information on changing it. And basically, this particular blog, when I was doing it, caused me to develop the code for the other way. And we have some things there. Going through the plus and minuses, the only thing that sticks out is Lactobacillus bulgaricus, which is common in most yogurt, not all yogurt, in most yogurt. And it would imply that if the kid is having yogurt, check the species in it. If it's the bulgaricus, don't buy it. Buy something with a different one in it. I then went over to another little bit of mischief, which I'm working on. I haven't released it because I'm not totally happy with it in terms of making it understandable to people. And hence, I don't want to cause more confusion than benefit. I have used a method called binary logistic regression. I ran the samples against all of the issues that are reported and got the values there. A negative number means less chance. Higher number means more chance. And what we find is when we do it, comparing the 3 of them, and these predictions, which are based solely on the enzymes that the bacteria are producing, and we do an estimate of that. We don't know the exact amount. and we make some assumptions. But from that, we end up with basically 5 items which the son with a diagnosis of autism and ADHD is number 1. He's the one with the highest odds there of anybody. For example, here, although the odds are 0, his sister and his mother are negative. In other words, much less odds of having it. And then up here, we have it interesting. Living in a house with a person with probable microbiome dysfunction. Guess what? Mama is the one living in it. And the other 2 are actually interesting, are negative, which is actually there's less chance of them being a healthy person living in a house with that. Because they are the microbiome dysfunction, which is, I find fascinating to say, okay, that sort of caused me to think a bit. Mom does come up the highest in terms of possibly having SIBO, which is just a FYI for something that she may want to check on. Frequently people have SIBO and not particularly aware of it. Okay, the daughter, guess what? Number 1, number 2. An example is up here for diarrhea. She is the one, not diarrhea. She is high in there. Her mother is a bit higher, but remember we are dealing with adult and kids, so sometimes you're doing, but we also have further up here constipation, and 1.2. The higher it is, the more like it. And indeed, she has constipation. The mother is negative. The son is sort of there. Autism tends to have constipation frequently, so I'm not surprised to see that number above 0. Okay, so we have a summary here. So that's basically that much. Now comes the question is, okay, we see a lovely analysis, a lot of it using things which are not on the website. I'm sorry. Some of them are there now, like for example, finding modifiers for bacteria, which we don't have any information about, is now up there, if we have that information. And so we went through and we did usual way. We went and look at probiotics based on symptoms, come through. Now remember, this one is done using the sample and the symptom combination, and we end up with a variety of here, and 3 basic things shows up as the high ones. I flip over to clinical studies, and cultural Lactobacillus rhamnosus is there, followed by my favorite, which is Metaphor, E. coli nici. Now, E. coli nici, I love it, but you only get it in certain countries in the world. Australia, Canada, UK, Germany, probably most of Europe, but not in the US. There is, however, an alternative, which is Semaphore 2, which is a different E. coli probiotic. Yes, E. coli can be a healthy, good for you probiotic, and that is available here, and I've actually linked to the store which was shipped around the world. The Rhinococcus is one thing I said I pass on. She's compared to the others, she's off, but she's in the middle. She's close to 50th percentile, and we're dealing with a kid, and it just goes into too much nebulousness. I tend to be conservative. Okay, there's not enough, which is definitive, so I stopped. Okay, we see everything is good for the house downstairs for the daughter, except for the E. coli and bacterial. Actually, it turns out that after I wrote this, that the daughter did have ongoing issues with E. coli, younger, and getting the Semaphore 2 would be very effective in displacing the bad E. coli with good E. coli. Yes, they are good E. coli. And so that's something which should be considered. And then we have over here, we have additional thing. And the interesting things are the should avoid, which is Shogun, broccoli. There's a big, long list. We'll see that in a while. But hey, the daughter must love it. She doesn't have to eat broccoli anymore. She has a good excuse. Sorry, couldn't resist the humor. So it gives suggestion. Again, the mother indicates she will discuss this with her MD before she implements it. For the sons, we went through the same process. We end up with pretty much the same set of probiotics, or very similar type of one. In the symptom-based one, now a single Lactobacillus or Bifidobacterium shows up in the list, which is interesting because those are the two which will be blindly given to people. Say, that's all you need. That's all you need. Just need a good Lactobacillus probiotic, a good Bifidobacterium. In this case, none of them showed up. Probably be a waste of money for using that for the son. And we went through and took a look. We actually end up with Lactobacillus Plantarum and Ramosis. Ramosis is the same one that the daughter with constipation is suggested. And the probiotic Plantarum is becoming more and more our favorite. And then barley, which means ideally barley porridge every day, which may take a little bit of effort. Over to Can Expert suggestion, we end up with Plantarum showing up. We end up with Ruturi, Inulin, Never Probiotic, Pulses, soy, high fiber diet, barley and high fiber diet, 10 chemical items to avoid, of course. That I added in this one L-taurine because sometimes it's put into energy drinks and other things targeting youth as being healthy. In this case, it's not healthy. So it's just something to be aware of because you may be getting it indirectly without being aware of it. Okay, mother, basically change the diet to suit the kids, and that probably will help the mother too. My usual disclaimer at the bottom, all of these suggestions come from mathematical models and not clinical experience. I'm not a medical professional. I'm a statistician. I'm a artificial intelligence expert. I'm a data scientist. That's what I have skills in. That's how the site gets built. I'm curious, which means I look at data and say, wait a minute, we don't have this data. Is there a way we can approximate or proxy the data? And if there is and it's reasonable, I run it up the site, give it a test, and if the results are good, then I add it to the site. So it's very much experimental, cutting edge. And so far the results have been good. I did get an email from the gal, and the gal has actually after a sample was taken and before I got the results and the blog done, was being taken Lactobacillus Plantarum, and it has been improving, but it's not totally subtle. So hopefully the addition of the other things will do it. Okay, so that goes through the blog. So now let's hop over to doing the walkthrough on the site. We're now looking at the site and the three people, and I have gone and done the naming of the sample so that it's easier to follow which one it is rather than whatever. Remember, you have the option to update, which including the name, the samples, which often if you are dealing with multiple people on your account, makes life easier. Okay, so first thing go here, and often my first item is to do just a quick health analysis, which is very simple right there. And voila, we see where everything is and everything in terms of things. And in general, nothing sticks out for the sun. Allergies, 30% of people, 86%. Again, we're dealing with children, which means that stats we're using are vaguely appropriate, and I mean vaguely. So you just have these things you end up having to do with a big grain of salt. But we do see things here, and according to Jason's criteria, we are doing pretty good. We are way up a 96th percentile. In other words, by the adult standards, Jason, we are very good. And then we have unhealthy bacteria spelling out there. And of course, we can go over to and we can of course go over and take a look what the data is like. And you see the numbers there. Again, a lot of these things are not particularly concerning, especially again the mismatch of ages for microbiome. Down here we see it's not quite as good, but still better than most people and healthy bacteria. We have there we do have a couple, we have E. coli associated with diarrhea in young children, a specific citation. So that characteristic is jiving with the mother's report and also with the suggestion of taking a good E. coli probiotic to help correct it. Okay, now we can go back to the samples and we can now go through, and usually we should remember to jack up the level so that we have more options. And again, let's go down, start with the son, the case with autism. We can go and work with expert consensus. And see things which are high or low. The thing again, all the consensus are based on adults and just problems applying to the kids. So, and let's go down and we can go in and we can actually implement this one. My suspicion is that the enzyme production for a child and an adult are similar, rather than just the bacteria. Because what happens as a child ages is the bacteria shift, but it shifts to maintain roughly similar enzyme balance, perhaps slightly different around puberty, but let's take a look, and we can just go in and take a look at suggested probiotics. And there we have items there, mere reason, there. Now remember again, all of these, if you click on them, it will take you over to which bacteria species are in each one of them, so you can do it. And most of these are containing bacillus, and there. So that's for the son. For the daughter, we get the numbers here. We see some mere reason again sitting at the top. Now remember, this is looking at the microbiome without any reference to the person's symptoms. But if we go back to 16S and look underneath symptoms, let's go and take a look at the son. 5 symptoms has already been entered, and I already did that ahead of that. And probiotics based on symptoms. There we have it, and we only have 4 items showing up. And we have this one being the best. It can be hard to get around the world, and it is a massive mixture, 22, actually a bit more than 22 species, but age 22 is the number which we can identify. And then we have SB Flora, which is a, again, I'm going to just click view, and there you see full of bacillus. So that is not surprising. If we go to Megasporus, more bacillus, and Flora Balance, and this one is another bacillus, and it's particular one, so it's simply sitting there. These are mixtures, and I basically take the output from all of them and then average them out according to the number of species. So these two are better than that. And then the prescriptive cyst sits at the top. We can do the same for the daughter. And with the daughter, we get a much bigger list of things. So we can go down and take a look at that one. We notice that SIBO is bouncing down. We go to this one. We see that it's a specific bacillus by itself is what is giving the good results. And then our consists of a variety of bacillus there and the values there. In general, when the values are the same here, usually it means that the species are the same. Not always, but often they are. Because why? Because retail people keep packaging the same combinations time and time again, often to compete with the competition. We'll produce the same ones. Hey, so we can sell it, and we can claim we're the same ones, or we can claim we are equivalent. So that's why you often get the stack of numbers being the same. And if you go over to mom, what? Nothing. There's absolutely nothing. And the reason is simple. No symptoms entered. No symptoms, no whatever. And you flip it back over here to go into symptoms. And we can do enter symptoms here. And I'm going to, out of curiosity, give her SIBO as 1. And I'm also going to toss in female. I'm just as a random exercise. And now I click an update. And there, and if we, oops. Okay, okay, I have a problem with the page, so I won't bother. I need to fix that, so hopefully it will be. Unchecking everything is a royal pain, and evidently I have done something wrong in the code, but I will fix it so you can put in your symptoms. Okay, so let's skip that for the moment. If you go back one, and now we do a update. And we get a whole bunch of things, and I think I have a big idea of why, but I'll see about doing it, and I think I know why too. And the why is because we got logged off. That's why we fell in there. So this is falling back to some default. So I'm going to log back in again. Occasionally, the service disconnects from excessive load or whatever. I need to track down the whys. So I'm back in, and I marked the 2 items for the mother, which is sort of almost a random exercise, but I just thought I'll do it to show you how it is. We see 2 symptoms listed there. And now we do probiotics based on symptoms. And something has gone wrong. Oh, I know why. Because those 2 symptoms have nothing associated with them. As in, there wasn't enough data to get associations statistically significant, or alternatively, there was nothing found. Okay, so that is a quick side detour on an edge case that you could encounter, and now you shouldn't be too concerned if you do it. So let's go back and let's look at the son with autism. We can, if we go up and flip up to intermediate or advanced, we now get showing up advanced suggestions. Advanced suggestions allows us to do something such as filter by autism. And what that means is that bacteria shifts which are in general agreement with what's seen in autism will be done, and I'm going to do explicit percentile, and I'm tending to use this more and more for things because of the nature of the study. The studies in general report the average of people with autism is higher or lower than our control group. Doesn't indicate it's extreme higher, just indicates it's higher by a small amount. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a wider sweep because we're using the PubMed studies here to do it, and we're going to click here, and we see we have actually 26 bacteria which are matches for autism with this one. Again, the data is usually for adults. I do know that many of the studies for autism are actually on children, so it's a reasonable thing, but you really need to check the studies if you are dealing with a different type of condition, because it may rarely occur with children, or most of the studies could be for adults. There's no easy way around it. So we have here, and then we have suggestions, and guess what? Lactobacillus Plantarum, as I described up above, is sitting there. Inulin, which is a probiotic, human milk alga, is another one. That often shows up if a child wasn't breastfed. It's human milk equivalent to breast milk, and that causes bacteria to shift in one direction. If you're doing bottle fed, then usually it shifts in a different way. There are a bunch of studies showing how the shifts are. So having it showing up here indicates, okay, I don't know if this woman has or has not breastfed the child, but I seem to remember in passing notes that she didn't. There's problems with him not taking a nipple. So that will help compensate. Then walnuts and barley. Ah, my favorite breakfast. Barley porridge with walnuts on it. And then we have other things. Again, barley, again, substance, which we saw before. Ramosis, GG, Carterella is a common thing. And other things. So we end up with the list of things here. Over here we have a list of things to avoid. Remember, these are all scales. So 1 is the highest. The thing that has the most negative or most positive is scaled to be 1, and then everything is scaled relative to that. And it's just sort of, okay, it doesn't indicate the degree of effect. It indicates the probability of having an effect. Because these are based on a number of studies reporting that it shifts. If 5 studies report something shift positively, it will get a higher precedence in the list than the substance that reports just 1 shift. And why do I do this way? Because we don't know. The more often it is found to be the case, the more likely it is to be true, and we apply the same type of logic. And then we have things here, for example, B12 and B9 are mild avoid. The reason they're mild is the numbers are so low here. Quercetin is the only one which is a really high avoid. Usually I do 0.5 as the magical number. And then we have commercial probiotic. We have Activa drink here and there. So those are additional things. Negative impact is Gasseri, Lactobacillus gasseri. And then we have the mixed impact, things which we don't know much about. Either we have no information about that, or it's some positive, some negative to it, and you can go there. So the top list of things which there's no negativeness that we are discerning from literature. Okay, and then we can go back and we can go and do, let's do ADHD, another one. And in this case, we have absolutely 0, nothing matched. And that is with the 20 percentile. So, okay, nothing there. We can now go back, and to get absolutely no matches, it's not impossible, it's not that unusual, which is why you have just a stack of different ways of doing it. And using expert opinion, we can go in here, and we can use, for example, JSON, execute there. We get 8 bacteria, which are selected. Again, those are suggested ranges for adults, not kids. Standard lab ranges, level 1. Oops, sorry, that's how it calculated. We get more there. We can go back. Change box whisker. 77, a lot more. Count off Markov. 115, even more. And top, bottom, we can go and let's just do 5 because we already had done some higher percentage. And we get 77. 77, he's in the top 5 or the bottom 5%. In other words, about 10% of all, and there's 77. But if you go back to the sun, we have 604. At 77, we would expect 770 if it was an even representation. It's not. It means he has more at the extreme than would be expected statistically. And we can see there the elusive ones. We have 115 ones which are rarely seen. That, however, in this case, could be caused because this is based across all samples from all labs, and we don't have a high number of lab results from Cosmos ID, Nirvana Biome, and because of that, is more likely to have high degree of elution. However, if you take a look at his mother and his sister, you can see he is far more of these oddities than they do. We have 5, 2, and 3. Again, same thing, 3, 6, and 3, 2, 2, and 2. So he has a lot of oddball bacteria, which are there. So that's part of the challenge of dealing with it. Okay, so we have gone back and forth a few times, and we have, oh, I still haven't fixed that. What I did mother instead of the sun. So I should have done sun. Make sure that when we go to the page, I can see some changes that you check the sample ID, and what I can do, and I'm going to use some other just to illustrate, is view consensus, and it will go and show things there, and you can sort by net take. So a polypropyl is strongly recommended. Folic acid, vitamin B9 is strongly again recommended for the mother to take. And then we have B1, even aspirin. And we can go and see a void count is there. We could try there. And okay, let's get that down. And plant-rich style, etc. So there's a bunch of suggestions here from the mother. Okay, so that's basically working the site. A bunch of stuff in the blog post was back-end stuff I calculated because of the uniqueness of having 3 data samples from the same family to deal with. So that gives you an idea. This consensus report is what I really like to suggest because we do not know the right way of selecting bacteria. So by trying all the things and then seeing what comes up as being should take from a dozen different ways is the most likely to actually be the best. And remember, these are suggestions. These are not requirements. This is not dogma. Each item here will help increase the odds of an improvement. Doesn't mean it guarantees it. It just increases the odds of it. And similarly down below, you got a bunch of things here which you probably want to exclude. Again, sorted, and the resistance chart is one thing there. For the mother, having baby milk synthetic is to avoid, which is sort of interesting. Similar to coming from fruit in general, or probiotics, that is. And we have the probiotic that the kids probably do better on, being an avoid. We have separate elm, cacao, etc. So there's a bunch of things there. Again, you don't have to eliminate everything, but take a look through the list and see if there's some things there you can trim back on or even eliminate without having a major inconvenience to your diet and eating style. So that's basically it. I see a bunch of things I need to change or improve, and particularly I'm interested about trying to fix the problem of these sudden unexpected log offs. Okay,